What if that nagging feeling in the back of your neck was real? What if those hands reaching out from the dark that you believed were there were there? What if the monster in the basement really existed? And what if there was really something under the bed? Would you have the courage to face your fears?
Part 1. An Ordinary Day. Laura Mitchell was elbow deep in dishwater when her phone buzzed against the kitchen counter. Probably another message from the neighborhood mom group chat. They'd been particularly active today, sharing links about some new flu strain making the rounds. She ignored it, focusing instead on scrubbing dried cereal from her youngest's favorite bowl. The morning had started like any other Tuesday. She dropped Zach, her second grader, at Franklin Elementary at 8:15, then Emily at Roosevelt Middle School by 8:30. Now, at 10:47 a.m., she was finally tackling the breakfast dishes and planning to fold that endless mountain of laundry before pickup time. The TV hummed in the background. Some breaking news about hospital overcrowding. Laura reached to turn up the volume, just as another text came through. Then another, and another. Drying her hands on her jeans, she picked up her phone. 23 unread messages. The first was from Emily's school. Emergency alert. Due to citywide health concerns, Roosevelt Middle School will be closing immediately. Please pick up your children as soon as possible. This is not a drill. Laura's heart skipped a beat. A similar message from Franklin Elementary followed. She was about to grab her keys when she glimpsed the TV. The news anchor looked pale, unusually disheveled. Behind him, footage showed what appeared to be riots outside Metro General Hospital. The caption read, "Breaking news. Violent incidents reported at multiple hospitals. Citizens advised to stay indoors." Through her kitchen window, Laura heard a car alarm blaring in the distance. Then another. Was that a scream? Her hands trembled as she pulled on her shoes. The kids were only 4 miles away. She could get there in 10 minutes if the traffic was good. Just a normal school pickup, she told herself, trying to steady her breathing. But as she peered out her front window, she saw Mrs. Henderson from across the street stumbling oddly down the sidewalk, her movements jerky and unnatural. Laura's phone buzzed again. This time it was her husband, Mark. "Don't leave the house. Something's very wrong. I'm trying to get home." She typed back quickly. "Can't wait. Schools are closing. Getting the kids." She grabbed her purse, her keys, and after a moment's hesitation, the Louisville Slugger that Mark kept by the coat rack. Better safe than sorry. The moment she opened her front door, another scream pierced the air, much closer this time. And Mrs. Henderson was now standing in the middle of the street, her head twisted at an impossible angle, facing Laura's house. Laura gripped the baseball bat tighter. Getting her kids just got a lot more complicated. Part 2. The Drive. Laura's hands shook as she locked the front door behind her. Mrs. Henderson had been her neighbor for 12 years. They shared coffee every Thursday morning. Now the woman's floral housecoat was stained dark red, and she moved like a broken marionette. "Sharon?" Laura called softly, instantly regretting it as Mrs. Henderson's head snapped toward the sound. The older woman's eyes were clouded over, milky white, and her jaw worked soundlessly, displaying teeth stained crimson. Laura ran. She made it to her minivan, fumbling with the key fob as Mrs. Henderson lurched toward her with a surprising speed. The van's lights flashed, doors unlocking just as her neighbor's fingers scraped against the driver's side window. Laura slammed the door shut and jammed the key into the ignition. As she reversed out the driveway, she caught glimpses of chaos up and down her once peaceful street. The baker's front door hung open, swaying in the breeze. Someone had crashed their car into the Williams' mailbox, and everywhere, people were either running or moving with that same terrible jerky gait. She pulled out her phone at the first stop sign, trying Mark again. Straight to voicemail. His office downtown was at least 30 minutes away, assuming he could even get out. The streets here were relatively clear, but she could see smoke rising from the city center. The radio offered no comfort. Advised: avoid all major hospitals and shopping centers. Military personnel have been deployed to contain the situation. If encountered, do not approach infected individuals. Repeat, do not approach. Laura turned it off. The children. Focus on the children. Roosevelt Middle School was closer, but Emily was 13, old enough to understand what was happening and follow instructions. 8-year-old Zach would be terrified. She turned left, heading for Franklin Elementary School. A police cruiser screamed past her, sirens blaring. 2 blocks later, she saw why. Outside the local urgent care clinic, a crowd of people pressed against the glass windows. Even from her car, she could tell they weren't trying to get help. They were hunting. She gripped the steering wheel tighter, swerving to avoid an abandoned bicycle in the middle of the road. The baseball bat slid across the passenger seat, and she grabbed it, pulling it closer. The elementary school was just ahead. Under normal circumstances, there'd be a line of minivans and SUVs waiting for afternoon pickup. Today, cars were scattered haphazardly across the parking lot. Some with doors left open. Parents rushed in and out of the building, clutching their children. As Laura pulled in, she spotted Vice Principal Chen trying to maintain order at the front entrance. He held a clipboard in one hand and a golf club in the other. Behind him, through the glass doors, she could see children being hurried through the halls by grim-faced teachers. She parked as close to the entrance as she could, grabbing the bat before stepping out. The air was filled with the sound of crying children and shouting adults. Somewhere in that building was her little boy, probably wondering why everyone was so scared. A woman passed her, bleeding from a bite on her arm, dragging a screaming kindergartner. Laura broke into a run, bat ready. She had to get Zach before. A piercing scream erupted from inside the school, then another, and another. They were coming from the cafeteria. Part 3. Franklin Elementary. Laura sprinted through the front doors, nearly colliding with Vice Principal Chen. His shirt was spattered with fresh blood. "Mrs. Mitchell!" He grabbed her arm, voice hoarse. "Second graders in the library, upper level. They're barricaded in. Rush is with them." He shoved his key card into her hand. "Backstairs by the art room. Don't." A crash from the cafeteria cut him off. "Don't use the main stairwell." She nodded, clutching the key card. "The cafeteria." "Lunch Lady Morris," he said grimly, adjusting his grip on the golf club. "She turned during first lunch period. We lost a few. Go. I'll hold here as long as I can." Laura ran down the familiar hallway, past cheerful artwork and vocabulary posters. A paper chain of letters spelled out, "Welcome to Fall." Though several letters had been torn down in the chaos, she could hear shuffling and moaning from the cafeteria growing louder. The back stairs were through the art room. She swiped the keycard with trembling hands, slipping inside. The room was a mess. Chairs overturned, paint spilled across the tables. A half-finished mural of a rainbow stretched across one wall, handprints and red paint scattered beneath it. Not paint, she realized. Not paint at all. Something moved behind the supply cabinet. "Hello?" A small voice whispered. "Mrs. Mitchell?" Katie Zhang, one of Zach's classmates, crawled out from her hiding spot. Her pink unicorn shirt was torn, and tears streaked her face. "My mom didn't come," Katie sobbed. "Everyone was running, and I got scared and..." "Shh." Laura pulled the girl close. "Stay with me. We're gonna find Zach and the others, okay?" Katie nodded, gripping Laura's free hand. Together they crept toward the back stairs. The stairwell was dark. Emergency lights cast everything in an eerie red glow. Their footsteps echoed as they climbed. Halfway up, Katie froze. "Listen." From above came the sound of children singing. Miss Rush, trying to keep her students calm. Laura recognized "You Are My Sunshine," the same song she sang to Zach when he had nightmares. They reached the library doors. Inside, the singing continued, punctuated by occasional sniffles. Laura swiped the keycard. Nothing happened. She tried again. The light stayed red. "Power's out upstairs," Katie whispered. "They locked it manually." Laura knocked softly. "Miss Rush, it's Laura Mitchell, Zach's mom." The singing stopped. Footsteps approached. "How do we know it's really you?" Mrs. Rush was barely audible through the door. "You have a tattoo of a cat's paw print on your wrist," Laura said. "Zach told me about it at a parent-teacher night. Said it was the coolest thing he'd ever seen." A pause. Then the sound of furniture being moved. The door opened just enough for them to squeeze through before Miss Rush and another parent quickly barricaded again. 20 children sat in a circle in the storytime rug, holding hands. Some were crying quietly. Others stared blankly ahead, too shocked to process what was happening. Zach wasn't among them. "Where?" Laura's voice cracked. "Where's my son?" Miss Rush's face crumpled. "He went to the bathroom, just before everything. Mr. Chen went to find him, but..." She gestured helplessly at the key card in Laura's hand. "That's his card." The singing from downstairs had stopped. In its place came screams, followed by the distinctive sound of a golf club hitting something soft, again and again. Then silence. Laura handed Katie to Miss Rush. "Keep her safe." "You can't go out there," Miss Rush pleaded. "The cafeteria staff. They're in the halls now." Laura gripped the baseball bat tighter. "Watch me." Part 4. The Halls. The library door closed behind Laura with a soft click. In the red emergency lighting, every shadow seemed to move. She forced herself to breathe slowly, listening. The upper floor was quiet. Too quiet. Somewhere below, something scraped against linoleum. She checked her phone. No service. No way to call for help. No way to warn Emily she might be late. The thought of her daughter waiting at Roosevelt Middle School made her stomach clench. Focus. One child at a time. The boys' bathroom was past the science lab, around the corner. Laura moved carefully, keeping her back to the wall. A paper airplane lay abandoned in her path. She stepped over it, remembering how many times she scolded Zach for making them in class. The science lab door was ajar. Inside, chairs were scattered, and a model of the solar system hung crookedly, Neptune dangling by a thread. A half-eaten sandwich sat on a desk, next to a worksheet about photosynthesis. The normalcy of it made her want to scream. Movement. Laura froze. Something was shuffling in the classroom. She heard wet, slapping footsteps and a low moan. Holding her breath, she peered through the gap in the door. Mr. Chen stood with his back to her, swaying slightly. His golf club was gone, and his neat button-down shirt was shredded, dark liquid dripping from his fingertips. Laura's hand tightened on the bat. She'd have to get past him to reach the bathroom. As if sensing her presence, Mr. Chen's head began to turn, neck crackling unnaturally. A small whisper from somewhere ahead. "Mom?" "Zach." Mr. Chen's milky eyes snapped toward the sound. He lurched forward, faster than Laura thought possible. She didn't hesitate. "Hey!" she shouted, stepping into view. The thing that had been Mr. Chen spun around her. His face was gray, mouth hanging open to reveal bloodied teeth. "Remember me? Parent-teacher conference? You said my son talks too much in class?" The creature lunged. Laura swung the bat with every ounce of strength she had, connecting with its shoulder. The impact sent shockwaves up her arms, but Mr. Chen barely stumbled. She swung again, aiming higher. This time, she didn't miss. Mr. Chen dropped. Laura stepped over him, trying not to look at his face. "Zach," she called softly. "Baby, where are you?" "Mom!" The supply closet at the end of the hall rattled. "I'm here, but don't come closer." Laura's heart stopped. "Are you hurt?" A pause. "No, but Mrs. Morris is out here. She's not right, Mom. She's just standing there, by the water fountain." Laura edged forward until she could see around the corner. The lunch lady stood perfectly still, facing the supply closet. Water from the drinking fountain dripping steadily behind her, the sound echoing through the hall. "Okay," Laura whispered. "Okay, Zach, listen carefully. When I say run, you're going to open that door and sprint to the library. Don't look back. Don't stop. Miss Rush will let you in. Do you understand?" "But what about the... Do you understand?" "Yes," he whimpered. Laura took a deep breath, adjusting her grip on the now dented bat. "I love you, baby." Then louder. "Hey, lunch lady! I heard today's mystery meat was expired." Mrs. Morris turned, revealing a face that barely looked human anymore. Her hairnet was still perfectly in place, a detail so absurd that Laura almost laughed. Instead, she screamed, "Run!" The supply closet burst open. Zach bolted as Mrs. Morris lunged for him, bony fingers grasping at air. Laura swung her bat, catching the lunch lady in the back. Unlike Mr. Chen, Mrs. Morris went down hard. "Mom!" Zach screamed. Laura turned to see Mr. Chen, somehow up again, staggering toward her son. She had a split-second choice: finish Mrs. Morris or save Zach. It wasn't really a choice after all. Part 5. The Escape. Laura sprinted forward, swinging the bat in a wide arc that caught Mr. Chen in the knees. He crumpled, giving Zach enough time to dart past. Behind her, Mrs. Morris was already starting to rise, her joints crackling like kindling. "Library!" Laura shouted. But Zach had frozen at the end of the hall, eyes wide with terror. She turned to see what he was staring at. The main stairwell door burst open. 3 cafeteria workers spilled through, their white uniforms now crimson. Behind them came a janitor, pushing his mop bucket, his neck bent at an impossible angle. They were trapped between 2 groups of infected. "Mom?" Zach's voice quivered. "What do we do?" Laura backed toward her son, keeping the bat raised. Her arms ached, and she could feel sweat soaking through her shirt. Think. The science lab. She grabbed Zach's hand and pulled him inside, slamming the door. They shoved the teacher's desk against it just as the first bodies hit from the other side. "The emergency exit!" Zach pointed to the window where a metal fire escape clung to the building's exterior. They'd practiced fire drills here, back when the worst things they had to fear was smoke inhalation. Laura pushed Zach back toward it as hands began breaking through the glass panels in the door. The window stuck when she tried to open it. Come on, she muttered, ramming her shoulder against the frame. It gave way with a screech of rusty metal. Cool autumn air rushed in. The desk wasn't going to hold much longer. Through the broken glass, she could see Mr. Chen's bloody face, his jaw working mechanically. Mrs. Morris had joined him, pressing against the door with inhuman strength. "You first." Laura lifted Zach onto the windowsill. "Straight down to the parking lot. Don't wait for me." "But now!" He scrambled onto the fire escape just as the desk gave way. The door exploded inward, and the infected poured through like a wave of twisted limbs and snapping teeth. Laura swung the bat one last time, catching Mrs. Morris in the face. The Louisville slugger finally cracked, splintering at the handle. She threw the broken piece at Mr. Chen and dove through the window. The fire escape rattled under her weight. Below, Zach was already halfway down, moving faster than she'd ever seen him move. She followed, trying not to look at the drop beneath her feet. A hand grabbed her ankle. Laura kicked backward, feeling fingers snap under her shoe. She looked up to see the janitor leaning out the window, his clouded eyes fixed on her. Another kick broke his grip, and she practically slid down the remaining stairs. Zach waited by the minivan, dancing from foot to foot. "Mom, hurry!" She fumbled with the key fob, unlocking the doors. "Get in!" They peeled out of the parking lot just as the infected began stumbling out the front doors. In the rearview mirror, Laura saw Miss Rush appear at the library window, waving. At least the others were still safe. Zach huddled in the passenger seat, hugging his knees. Is Emily okay?" Laura checked her phone again. Still no service. The streets ahead were clearer now, Everyone was either inside or not themselves anymore. Smoke rose from downtown, and she could hear distant sirens. "We're going to get her right now," Laura promised, turning toward Roosevelt Middle School. She tried not to think about the broken baseball bat, or how she had no weapon now. She's smart. She'll be okay. "Mom?" Zach's voice was small. "I saw Tommy get bit in the cafeteria before Mr. Chen found me. He changed so fast." Laura reached over and squeezed his hand. "Don't think about that now." "But what if Emily—" "She's fine." Laura cut him off, pressing harder on the accelerator. The engine roared as they sped past abandoned cars and stumbling figures. She has to be. 3 miles to Roosevelt Middle School. The sun was directly overhead now, casting harsh shadows that made it hard to tell which moving shapes were human and which weren't. Laura gripped the steering wheel tighter. "Just hold on, Emily. Mom's coming." Part 6. Roosevelt Middle School. The entrance to Roosevelt Middle School was blocked by a city bus. It had crashed through the front gates, coming to rest at an angle that sealed off the main parking lot. Bodies. Laura refused to check if they were moving, lay scattered around it. "Stay in the car," she told Zach, pulling up to the bus. "Lock the door. If anything happens, don't leave me." He grabbed her arm, eyes wide. "Please, Mom, don't go." Laura's heart cracked. Her 8-year-old suddenly looked so much younger, dried tears tracking down his dirty cheeks. But Emily was somewhere inside that building. "Okay," she said finally. "Okay, but you stay right behind me. And if I tell you to run, I run." He nodded. "No looking back, like before." They got out of the minivan. Laura grabbed the ice scraper from under her seat. A poor replacement for the bat, but better than nothing. The school grounds were eerily silent. Paper and debris skittered across the courtyard in the autumn breeze. They found a gap between the bus and the fence, barely wide enough to squeeze through. On the other side, the school's front doors hung open. A trail of blood led inside. Laura's phone buzzed. The first signal she'd had in an hour. A text from Mark. "Downtown overrun. National Guard moving in. Get somewhere safe. Love you." She typed back quickly. "At Roosevelt. Getting Emily. Love you too." The main hallway was darker than Franklin had been, and colder. Their footsteps echoed on the tile floor despite their attempts to move quietly. A lone shoe lay in their path. A pink Converse sneaker. Emily had the same pair. "Where would she be?" Zach whispered. Laura checked her watch. 12:45. Lunch period, cafeteria, or library. She tried to remember Emily's schedule, unless her class locked down somewhere else. A crash echoed from somewhere above, followed by screaming. Laura pulled Zach behind a row of lockers just as a group of students ran past, followed by something that might once have been their gym teacher. His whistle still hung around his neck, bouncing as he lurched after them. When they were gone, Laura and Zach crept forward. The cafeteria doors chained shut, a piece of paper taped to them. "Quarantine. Do not enter." Library, Laura decided. They found the stairs, climbing carefully. Each floor had signs of struggle. Overturned chairs, broken windows, bloody handprints on the walls. The third-floor library was supposed to be the school's pride and joy, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Now those windows were shattered, letting in a bitter cold that carried the smell of smoke. Through the broken glass, Laura could see military helicopters circling downtown. The library doors were barricaded with tables and chairs, but someone had left them slightly ajar. Laura peered through the gap. Inside, about 30 students huddled between the stacks, some crying, others typing frantically on phones that probably had no signal. A few teachers moved between groups, trying to maintain calm, but no Emily. "Mrs. Mitchell?" Laura turned to see Jenny Wong, Emily's best friend, approaching from behind the bookshelf. Her glasses were cracked, and she held a pair of scissors like a weapon. "Jenny? Where's Emily?" The girl's face crumpled. She went to help Mr. Parker. When everyone started turning, he said he knew a safe way through the science wing. A bunch of kids went with him. That was an hour ago." Laura's blood ran cold. "The science wing?" Jenny nodded. "Through the chemistry labs. There's a bridge to the vocational building. Emily said..." She swallowed hard. "Emily said she'd come back for me. But then we heard the screaming." Before Laura could respond, an alarm blared through the building. Outside, the military helicopters were getting closer. A teacher's voice rang out. "They're evacuating the area! Everyone needs to..." The rest was drowned out by the sound of breaking glass and screaming from the floor below. Lots of screaming. Laura grabbed Jenny's hand. "Show me how to get to the science wing." "Mom," Zach tugged at her shirt. "The helicopters. Not without your sister." Jenny pointed to a door half hidden behind a fallen shelf. "Through there. Past the computer lab. But Mrs. Mitchell..." She hesitated. "The chemistry teacher. She turned. We saw her eating." Laura pushed down her horror. "Stay here. Help is coming." She turned to Zach. "You too, stay with Jenny." This time, Zach didn't argue. He was staring at the helicopters, now close enough to see the soldiers inside. Laura pulled aside the shelf, gripping her ice scraper. The door opened on a dark hallway that reeked of chemicals. Somewhere in the darkness, she heard glass crunching under shuffling feet. And very faintly, a familiar voice calling for help. Part 7. The Bridge. The chemical smell grew stronger as Laura crept down the hallway, her shoes sticking slightly to spilled solutions on the floor. Emergency lights cast everything in a sickly green glow, and somewhere ahead, she could hear glass containers rolling and clinking. "Emily!" she called softly. A crash, then, "Mom?" The voice came from the last classroom. "Mom, don't come in here! She's in here!" Laura's heart leaped. Emily was alive, but the warning in her daughter's voice made her blood run cold. Through the classroom's wire-reinforced window, she could make out overturned lab tables and broken beakers. Emily was crouched on top of a storage cabinet, clutching a microscope like a weapon. Below her, Dr. Warren, the chemistry teacher, clawed at the cabinet's metal sides. The woman's lab coat was shredded, her hair wild, skin gray where it wasn't covered in chemical burns. Two other students huddled by the emergency shower in the corner. Between them and the door lay Mr. Parker, or what was left of him. He wasn't moving. "The bridge!" Emily called, her voice shaking. "It's through the prep room, but we can't get past her." Laura tested the door. Locked. She had the keycard from Franklin, but the card reader's light was dead. Through the window, she could see the keys still hanging from Dr. Warren's belt. The helicopter sounds were getting closer. A voice boomed from a megaphone outside. "This area will be sanitized in 10 minutes. Evacuate immediately." Laura looked at her ice scraper, then at the infected teacher. An idea formed. A terrible, dangerous idea. "Emily," she called. "The emergency shower. Can you reach it?" Her daughter nodded. "On my signal. Pull it. Then you and the others run from the prep room. Don't stop." "But trust me." Laura kicked the door as hard as she could. The lock held, but Dr. Warren spun toward the sound, losing interest in Emily. She shambled toward the door, snapping her teeth. Laura kicked again. The lock groaned. One more kick and the door burst open. Dr. Warren lunged forward just as Laura ducked and rolled past her. "Now!" Emily yanked the shower chain. A torrent of water crashed down, catching Dr. Warren full in the face. The teacher stumbled, slipping on the wet floor. The other students scrambled for the prep room door as Laura snatched the keycard from the infected woman's belt. "Run!" Laura shouted, backing toward the prep room. Dr. Warren thrashed in the water. Her movements became more frenzied as the chemical residue on her clothes and skin began to react. They sprinted through the prep room and onto the enclosed bridge, connecting to the vocational building. Emily slammed the door behind them. Through the bridge's windows, they could see more helicopters approaching. Soldiers were rappelling down on the roof. "We have to go back to get Zach," Laura said. Emily grabbed her hand. "This way. The auto shop has a door to the parking lot." They ran, the two other students close behind. Through the vocational building windows, Laura could see military vehicles surrounding the school. A soldier was helping students climb down from the library windows. They burst out the auto shop door just as the first helicopter passed overhead, close enough to feel the wind from its rotors. Zach was already there, waving frantically from beside a military transport vehicle. Jenny stood next to him, still clutching her scissors. "Move, move, move!" a soldier shouted, waving them toward the truck. "We're clearing the building!" Laura pushed the kids ahead of her, counting heads as they climbed in. Emily, Zach, Jenny, the two from the chemistry lab. Behind them, the first explosion rocked the science wing. Green smoke billowed from the windows. The truck's engine roared to life as more detonations followed. Laura held her children close, feeling them trembling against her. Through the back flap, she could see Roosevelt Middle School disappearing in a haze of smoke and chemical fog. Her phone buzzed one last time. Mark. "Made it to the evacuation center. Are you safe?" Laura looked at Emily, who had her arm around a still shaking Zach. Both were dirty, terrified, but alive. She pulled them closer and tight back. "We're safe. All of us. Coming to you now." The military truck turned on the highway, joining a convoy of vehicles heading out of the city. In her 13 years as a mother, school pickup had never been quite this complicated. But she'd done it. She'd gotten her kids. The rest, the city, the infection, the future, they'd figure out together. For now, that was enough. Behind them, Roosevelt Middle School burned, taking its infected with it. Ahead lay uncertainty, but Laura had what mattered most, her children, safe beside her as they drove away from the ashes of their old life and toward whatever came next. Well, I hope you enjoyed that story. I took this recommendation. I actually can't remember who recommended it, but whichever one you guys did, great choice, because this single mother, or not even single mother, this stay-at-home mom story rocked. Like, I really, really enjoyed doing this one. And I mean, I could see a mom doing this. Like, moms are crazy. Like, my girlfriend with our kids, she would absolutely go Rambo mode to save our kids from whatever, aliens, zombies, werewolves, vampires, doesn't matter. I could see most, if not every single mom doing some cool stuff like this. But like I said, I hope you enjoyed it. Come back next time for some more scary stories. And as always, remember to face your fears.